So hello and welcome back to another episode of whatever the fuck this is. I'm going to be covering all the new breakthroughs that happened with Blind Intro in the last week and basically explain why the bounty has now been claimed by Mr. Walrus. Hello YouTube. So this is going to be a follow-up to my Blind Intro in Dishonored, a short summary of everything we know, because this video is now outdated because a bunch of new shit was figured out and basically everything I covered here was not useful. This is going to be way more unhinged than the last time I did this because I have not prepared very well for this and I don't feel like I understand it well enough. So this is going to be great. So a little bit of a history lesson. About a week and a half ago, Mr. Walrus sent a very cryptic message to me saying that he had a save which got guaranteed Blind Intro. From there on out, it all just kind of spiraled into us knowing exactly what makes the Blind Intro happen. We have confirmed that it works now on version 1.4 of Dishonored. We have confirmed that it works on high frame rates and low frame rates. We have confirmed that it works from a quick save. All of these like random setups for it, it's been the only thing we've had up until this point. They function on any version of the game with any setup. So first off, I want to just show off what Walrus did. So when you spawn into the intro section of Dishonored, there's a bunch of NPCs, and Walrus had a suspicion that one of the NPCs was what was causing Blind Intro. So he opened up the console and he used view class pawn, which then lets you switch between different characters and see the world from their perspective. He figured out that if you then use kill viewed actor on that guy, aka the guard that was standing out here, and then you finish the intro normally, then you get Blind Intro. And this happens every time as long as that guard is dead. He figured this out first by killing every non-important NPC for the cutscene. Like he just kept Emily, Jessamine, and the Lord Regent, and then eventually figured out that it was that one guard, which then led to a opening of the floodgates of sorts of discoveries. So it was figured out that by using these two console commands and then running over here and sleep darting the man, you can get the same result. So this is still a Blind Intro. He doesn't have to be despawned, and it has nothing to do with any other NPCs. It's just this guy that we care about. Which then led us to think about, well, what other things can we do to this man? If you aggro him completely, then the game overs. If you manage to have him die from fall damage by teleporting off of this ledge out into the water, for example, you also get a game over. So the question then became, what other states can we put him in normally that will allow us to have him outside of this animation, which is what seems to cause the Blind Intro to happen, is that he's in this animation and something goes wrong when it's switching the animation. What other things can we do to manage to have him do that? So it was figured out that if you get a gun, which we first figured out by using the gun from over here, like going out of bounds using the elevator and then running around, landing on this guard's head, having him shoot this guard, picking up his gun and then getting more bullets, running back over to the man by going inbounds over here, and first you gotta jump on this man's head and then run over here, sit down, shoot close to him so he gets a little bit more aggroed, but he doesn't know where you are. So you never got spotted and doesn't game over. If you then get over to the intro segment by doing some elevators and being sneaky, it's still, as you might expect at this point, gonna be a Blind Intro. So if you're able to aggro him but not have him spot you, it's a Blind Intro. This was a strat by SOM1 LSE, and Walrus figured out that if we just run over here and go out of bounds go back here to a different guard who is also out of bounds. Yeah, I should mention, you can only get the guns from guards that are outside of the bounds of the level. If you aggro anyone who's inbounds, the game overs immediately. If you aggro anyone who's out of bounds, the game just doesn't really have a failsafe for that, and so you can just kind of do that. Here I land on this guy's head and drop him down, so he dies from fall damage right away, and we get his gun. This only gives you 1 bullet, so this strat is a lot less consistent. Land on his head again to have him take a little bit of damage before you shoot at him. But yeah, this again gets blind intro. So that's the most refined version of the strat we have right now. You can do it slightly differently, where instead of after jumping on his head, instead of going back like into the boathouse, you can go on top of it to save a couple more seconds. This is still gonna end up with like perfect execution being like 12 seconds slower than just doing the intro normally. So it's not really all that useful for us for other purposes than understanding what is going on. This is a save I made after I just got a completely random blind intro. If I now use Ghost to fly back over to the guard we're thinking about, if we pay attention to the way he's standing here, you'll see that he's standing here with his arms crossed. This is important. If we now instead enter the cutscene normally, without blind intro, and then fly over to him, you will see that he has his arms at his side instead of arms crossed. He's still standing in the same spot. The only thing is that his posture has changed. So at some point during that cutscene, the game tries to put him into this, which is like the default idle state for characters. It's kind of this game's version of a T-pose. So when the game is trying to put him into this state, it sometimes fucks up and doesn't manage to do that. And that is what triggers a blind intro. Our current theory as to why it happens randomly is that it's his normal, like, standing still with his arms crossed animation looping, and you manage to interact or like enter the cutscene exactly as it's looping. Although we're not quite sure of that. But you can see he has a standing still animation here where his arms are like slightly swaying. He's moving a little bit. And it might just be that if you enter the cutscene right as this animation loops, he will trigger the blind intro for us. Another thing that it could also be is that instead of it being when the animation is looping, it's when he's getting into the spot, like right there. So right as he's walking to the spot instead. That's basically everything we figured out, which is then teaching us that there's probably never going to be a consistent blind intro setup. So the reason why we say that this is then a reason why we won't be able to get a blind intro is that while he's walking over here, the speed he turns at for these turns is dependent on his frame rate, like slightly. So it'll be slightly slower or faster based on your specific frames for the entire thing. And trying to be frame perfect with when you're walking into the cutscene up there, right as he is changing his animation state, is not something we'll be able to do with any level of consistency with our current understanding. It might change in the future, but it doesn't seem like it. So now I'm going to cover some edge cases that I haven't really talked about yet, but that we know exist. When you talk to him, one of the lines that he can have triggers him to go into a different animation. This one, when he moves his hand like that. So I'm going to freeze him and then use Ghost to fly up to the cutscene, and then unfreeze him and enter the cutscene. The game is now in blind intro mode. In conclusion, this guard is the key to everything. And the last theory that we have that might work in terms of getting a fast, somewhat consistent setup for doing anything to him is that as soon as you spawn in, you run over, you slide into him, and then you somehow manage to get him to aggro onto you by jumping on his head without him spotting you. This has been kind of debunked because he aggroes to you immediately as soon as you jump off of his head. And it's like, it's not something where you can land on a man's head and he won't spot you. But that would then maybe allow us to do a faster version of this where we don't have to go get a gun. Other than that, the random blind intro as it is right now is the only viable method of using this glitch for speedruns. The bounty has been claimed, and it was claimed by Mr. Walrus because he figured out the legwork with the fact that that guard is what triggers blind intro, and by doing so, he led to the floodgates opening in terms of everything we discovered, and we are giving him the bounty, the $300 bounty. Walrus has decided, very generously, to give away the bounty to Dr. T-Chops for the work he has put in regarding making a cutscene speed-up mod for this game. And with that, I feel, unless something huge is discovered, that the saga of the blind intro has come to an end. We know who triggers it, we know lots of ways to trigger it, and we know that none of the really fast ways we can interact with the guy trigger it, except for the one version which never fucking works, which is jumping on his head. So the dream is dead. Long live the dream, and thanks for watching, and goodbye.